Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for CloudOne's webinar with IBM this afternoon, Jazz Reporting Service 6.0.2, What's New? I'm Andrea Massimilian, your moderator for today. Today's webinar is different than past ones because we made it simple to ask questions during the session. We wanted to make it a little more interactive. Our speaker today, Jeff, is willing to answer questions throughout the presentation, so simply unmute your phone and ask away. If you're not asking a question, we ask you that you please go on mute. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jeff Babylon, part of the Global Response Team for IBM IoT Watson. And with that, I'll pass it on to Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. And happy Friday to everyone. And I'm extremely excited that everyone can actually ask questions and interact in today's session. So it should be a much better session for everybody in terms of the amount of data that we can convey back and forth. Okay, so ideally, what I want to try and talk to today about JRS in version 6.02 is getting around that user interface, because that can be a little daunting for folks who've never used JRS. I'm going to assume that most people have at least a base understanding of using the report builder and building some reports, but we'll take a look at the user interface and getting around and how best to do that. I'm going to cover a little bit of the enhancements or the changes that were made in 6.02, one of which being performance. We'll take a look at data sources in terms of which data sources are being used and how that affects how you're using your reports or what data you're actually available to report on. And then we'll take a little bit of a deep dive into report generation and take a look at some of these new features that were added in 6.02, like reporting against collections or modules, going after timesheet data, etc. So we'll take a look at that. So let me go ahead and get out of PowerPoint here and act over to the web. One sec here. Okay. So I've got my own little test environment with 6.02 up here. Really, most people are going to get to Report Builder using the little house navigation menu, which is the little arrow next to the house icon, and just going to Reports. You can also use your URL and just go to /rs as your context and then /reports. So either way you get there, it's quick to get there. But one of the things I want to point out to you in terms of navigation is when you're going to keep reports or you're going to work with reports, it's probably best to just right-click and open a new tab so that you have a quick way to get back and forth between your Jazz dashboard. Because one of the things I want to point out in terms of navigating the Report Builder interface, you don't immediately see a quick way to get right back to where you were in terms of the Jazz platform. Okay? If I were to click Projects, that's an integration that they've put here that basically is going to take you to the All Projects page for CCM, because there's a tight integration between Report Builder and doing quick planning within RTC project plans. So this right here is only going to take you to the All Projects page of CCM, and then you can actually work with your work items for quick planning in terms of being right inside the Report Builder interface. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of that tight integration. So it doesn't appear at first glance that there's a quick way to get back to like where I was with my dashboard. If I want to do that, I can do it in a couple of different ways. I can either go to my, let me go back to Reports, and from my name I can get to View Profile, or on the main Report Builder, I can always go Admin and then Jazz Dashboard to get back there. So it's not as intuitive or as quick to get right back where you were, so that's why I always say it's best to just right-click and then say Open a New Window, and that way you have a Report Builder window open and then you've got your other stuff that you're working on. Okay? So let me get back here to the main Report Builder interface. Okay, so most of the interface is ascribing to a blue mix look and feel. So a lot of our products are headed that way in terms of the menu style and look and feel. So that's why it's laid out in this particular way. One of the things that I want to point out to you right away is new as of 6.02 is this Learn feature from the menu. And it's basically quick links off to a lot of information that you can make use of in terms of building reports, getting information like videos on how to, etc. So if there's something that you want to do but you don't know how, you can most likely find a link or at least get a good pointer to areas of information in terms of how to begin starting the process of building that particular report you want to build. Okay. So let me go back here. There are a couple of quick links off to the blog in the Jazz.net forum. So this is all the blogs around rational products and stuff that are out on Jazz.net, and then this is our Jazz.net forum where you can post questions and stuff. So if you were to go out to that, it's going to pop a new window so you don't have to worry about losing the context of your report builder. But it's a quick way to get over here to questions that have been posted to the forum. So maybe you're having a problem with a report, or there's a certain challenge you're having trying to build a report. You can post a question out here, and hopefully it gets answered pretty quickly. Okay? And feel free to stop me as I'm going, because I know I have a tendency to talk a little fast. So just feel free to interrupt me, and if you have a question, I can certainly pause and we can address your question at that point. Okay? All right, so one of the things that I want to point out is we have this all report section and then the build. The difference is that all the reports that are available out of the box, ones that other people have created, et cetera, are going to be listed under this all reports. It's typically, it was typically, I should say, this is the interface, or the option all reports is where you would go if you wanted to export reports. So if I wanted to, say, select a set of reports and then do an export, this is where I would come. This is where the button is enabled. In 502, this is the only way that you can do an export. So if any of you are still using 502, that would be the only way to get to the export feature. In 6.0, 6.01 and above, it was changed so that you can get to this export feature from either all reports or from my reports. Okay? And my reports just tends to give you anything that you've created that's bundled by tag. Okay? So any of these reports that I go into under this is just going to show that it's been a report that I created. And I tend to like to work that way in terms of using the My Reports. Tags are an important feature of this user interface. As you have lots of users building out reports, you're going to want to make sure you have thought through a good tagging structure or a tagging nomenclature, as it were, in order to prevent getting, thousands of reports out here that are kind of cluttered and hard to sift through. There is a filter so that you can look for a specific report if you wanted to, like, I don't know, let's look for something with chart. Or have. How about, so it's a way to quickly reduce the list, but again, those tags are immeasurable in terms of being able to get in here and quickly find what you're looking for as you start getting lots of users building out reports. Okay? Let me go back here to this particular report builder menu, and we'll talk a little bit about admin. A lot of you will recognize this. This was the kind of the original admin from 502 days, right, in terms of the look and feel. You got your link up here to get back to the main report builder interface. You got your link to get to the Jazz dashboard. The admin functionalities, data sources, importing ready-to-use or importing additional reports that you may have exported from another instance, et cetera, and then managing your report managers. Let me go into data sources here, and we'll talk a little bit about data sources. So if you're using or if you have LQE in play as well, you'll notice that you've got Lifecycle Query Engine, Lifecycle Query Engine using configurations. It's just a difference in terms of what you have available to you for reporting based upon these two options. If you're wanting to report solely and specifically on configurations, then you're going to go down this path. Okay? These are all considered endpoints or data endpoints. If you change the name, if you go into this and say Rational Data Warehouse, if you start changing the names and stuff like that, you may find that you have issues with some of your reports. So you want to make sure that you're not changing the names of your data sources as defined with the existing reports without properly vetting that you're not going to cause reports or issues to the existing reports that you've got. Because most of the reports are going to have this in terms of the definition for the report so that it knows what endpoint it needs to go after. Okay? One of the enhancements that we've got, let me go back to admin. One of the enhancements we've got in 602 is relative to importing additional reports. And the reason I was speaking a little bit about data warehouse and the naming of that particular endpoint or that data source, when you're bringing in reports that you've exported, say from per perhaps another instance, it gives you the ability to pick the data source that those reports should go against. So if you've exported reports that are lifecycle query engine specific, then you need to go against that, right? If you're trying to import reports, and this is a situation that I ran into recently with a client, if you're trying to import some reports and you've exported them, say you were doing a migration or you were doing something else and your other instance had a different name for the data warehouse, you need to have a data warehouse that's named the same as that other data warehouse when you're bringing those in. But this gives you a quick way to pick the right data source to bring those reports in against, okay? So that's one of the newer things that's in our 602. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about data sources and the data that you're going to get, right? So when we're working with the data warehouse, all of the project areas that aren't involved in global configuration management are still populating their data or pushing their data to the data warehouse when ETL collections are run, okay? So anything that's non-global configuration management, you're going to be using your data warehouse to get at for reporting purposes. Lifecycle query engine is typically going to be used against those projects that are globally configured, but then you can also just use Lifecycle Query Engine if that's your preference too as a standalone data source. That's what this one is more akin to. It's all of the project area data that are tracked resource sets, but it's across all your projects whether they're global configured or not, okay? If that makes sense to everybody, and please feel free to stop me if you have a question around that aspect. Okay, so let's go back here to Report Builder. So in terms of working with your reports and navigating the interface, the main challenges I see in terms of challenges for people getting around or navigating is just how do I get back from where I got? If I ended up clicking this button to get to the Report Builder, how do I get back? So you can save yourself a whole lot of where am I and how do I get back where I was by just right-clicking and opening it that way from the right context menu. Okay, that way you have multiple windows open and you can just bounce between them. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward in terms of where you want to go and what you want to do. If you're going to build a report, you're just going to come to build, and then you're going to start filling out your pieces and parts. So I'm going to stop there on navigation for a little bit, and then I want to talk a little bit about there's a couple of performance enhancements for reporting or JAS reporting service that went in 602. They're around the caching of access control for projects. So if I'm going to build a report, and let me just hit continue here, this list of project areas that's populated here, one of the aspects of the performance improvement has to do with this list that gets populated. So basically it's cached information, and they made some changes so that it doesn't necessarily have to be built every time somebody goes to limit scope, okay? So the caching is around this, and every time the model is refreshed, and it's refreshed, let me pause 1 second and explain that. The meta model that you're reporting against comes from whatever data source is your default. In this case, I'm using the Rational Data Warehouse. So when I hit refresh on this particular data source, it has everything to do with the meta model for the data warehouse because that's my default source. If my default source was LQE, then the meta model would be around LQE, okay? So going back to where I was and talking about the performance, so this list of project areas is basically cached in terms of access control for a user. The change they made has to do with basically refreshing those access permissions every time the meta model is refreshed so that it doesn't have to be refreshed on demand every time a user wants to expand and go into this section. And that makes it quite a bit quicker. The other enhancement that they made to performance is more so around the heuristics for checking access permissions. So if you have a report that's on a shared dashboard, a shared project area dashboard or team dashboard that requires knowing who can access the particular information for that project area, that information in terms of how they do that query, the heuristics around it, has been modified to make it much faster so that it's quicker to load those access controls for who can see what's on the project dashboard itself. So that should make loading of some of those dashboard widgets that are displaying information that requires access control much quicker. Okay? All right, so let me pause at that point, and I actually want to shift gears for just a second and talk about, let's see, snooze. And let's talk about, let me get back here, data sources in terms of the information that's coming or being populated from either LQE or data collection component. And the reason I want to do that is because there's an enhancement that allows customization of ETLs in 602. Okay, prior to 602, you were mandated to be using whatever was defined for ETLs by the development team. Okay, you couldn't change these, you couldn't customize these, etc. In 602, that changes. Okay, and you can actively add data tables, data columns, ETL-specific pieces of information that may not currently be in the data warehouse into the data warehouse. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that just simply because that's something that should definitely be bound in a process. Okay? There's a page, and let me just switch over to it for a second, that walks you through how to do the data collection customization. So if you need to add additional data that you can't currently report on into your ETL process so that you can begin reporting against it, this will walk you how to do that. Okay? Now, that said, let me go back to here. The reason I say you want to bound this within a really tight process is that there's a two-step process here, right? You're going to have to get your hands on the ETL information to begin with. You're going to have to modify or create your own, and then that's got to be repopulated back to a server mapping directory within the DCC installation folder. Okay? So once that information has been done, you've actually, customized what you wanted added or modified existing stuff, and that data is back there, then this load jobs button that appears now is basically engineered so that it can pick up from that mapping directory those ETL customizations that you've done. The reason for my comment around you want to bound that with a tight process is you want to go through some testing variations to understand the impacts that you're adding to your collection times. Okay? So as you're doing your data collection jobs, as those are running, you want to understand, if I'm adding new or if I'm modifying existing, I want to understand time-wise what I'm doing to my collection times. And that's why I say that that's a process that you want to make sure you've thought through long and hard, and that you have good controls around that process, because you don't want anybody just creating new ETLs or modifying existing ones and causing yourself problems relative to times or failures because something wasn't authored correctly. Does that make sense?
Jeff, we have asked, someone messaged me with a question.
Okay, feel free to ask away. Just unmute your...
Yes. So everyone, you can of course ask me and I'll ask it, or you can also unmute yourself and ask it yourself. In 6.01, you can use access controls by editing SQL and deleting a join to an authorization table that specifies as your user ID. Same in 6.02?
So if the question's around the advanced SQL feature of building a report, in terms of the functionality, let me just confirm that that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is Gordon Flood. Yeah, let me clarify a little bit. It is around the advanced SQL, advanced function edit SQL. And when we do that, we see that the SQL includes a join to an auth table that filters against your user ID, and that if we delete that, then we're able to see data that we wouldn't otherwise see. And am I interpreting that correctly? And if so, does that still exist in 602? Is it still implemented in that way? That you can
so if I understand the query that you modified, or the parameters for which you modified to get at data that you shouldn't see, meaning removing the access check per se, then was that, I guess my first question is, was that raised as a defect? Because that shouldn't be allowed.
We were kind of bemused and a little busy at the time, so no, we didn't raise it as a defect.
I think just being in the capacity that I am in my day-to-day job, I will reach out to report builder and data collection folks and talk to them about doing just that. If you have a tried and true scenario with a specific report for which you've modified that, If you want to reach out to me on babylonj@us.ibm.com, send me the scenario, and I'll be happy to put that forward to development as a defect.
Okay, we'll do that. Our immediate response to it was to deny advanced SQL to folks initially.
Right. However, I
Okay,
mean, there may be good cause for you to need to use that advanced SQL. So
yeah,
I definitely want to follow up on that, because that's concern in my mind that you can get around the access control if you have a mind to, and that's not the intent in any of these products. Is to allow people to figure out creative ways to get around the access control, right?
It weren't hard. If you can pop your email or somebody, or if it's already in the documentation or whatever, I'll be glad to forward it to you. I didn't get it when you read it off.
You can see my screen, right? That's me.
Okay, Babylon J, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about actually customizing ETLs, but do so with extreme caution and a tight set of process controls, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you've introduced extremely long-running collections because of what you're trying to go after or customize, okay? All right, so let's go back to reports, and let's talk a little bit about, actually I'm going to go here, my reports, and let's talk a little, whoops, wrong one. Talk a little bit about user-sensitive context reporting. Let me go into Edit. Data. Okay. So when I'm building a report, and I built a few reports. Oh, not this one. Let me just go this way. Just pick this. Continue. Let me go against JKE. Pick work item. Continue. Add condition. One of the things that they added in 602 is the ability to set a context around a user, okay, in terms of your conditions. So if I go into conditions when I'm building out a report and I pick a field like creator that's based upon a user ID, I can either pick specific users or I can pick current user. The behavior for current user, which is basically the addition here, the behavior is that if I set it to be current user, then it's going to be default to the current logged in user. So if I build a report, that means whoever logs in to see it, it's going to be based upon their user ID, and so the data is going to be dynamic to their ID. So if I want to look at a list of work items in a certain state based upon current user, if I log in, it's going to show me those work items to me. If Bob logs in, he's going to look at work items associated to his logged in user ID, which is kind of nice because that way you can build a single report that serves many purposes depending upon who's looking at it. Okay. So and the selected user, I mean, this is the same interface that you get whenever you're trying to add users to whatever you're doing within any of our products, and that is it's basically going to give you the search capability to look at users that are registered or Jazz registered users. Okay, so whatever's defined in your Jazz user group, your Jazz admins, etc. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and close out of this, and let me go back here, and I want to talk about one of the other enhancements here. So let's go over here to my reports, and let's talk about, actually, let's do timesheets here. And so, whoops, okay, choose data. All right, so for timesheets, basically, if you want to be able to, a lot of folks have expressed an interest in trying to get at the timesheet information. Both LQE and the data warehouse data sources allow you to do that within 602. Okay, and basically, if I want to pick work item as my artifact type, in my traceability or this optional traceability links section, basically I can say I can open. Whoops. it's basically, let me remove this so you can see it. Okay, so in this relationship, or pick a relationship, as I'm looking at the traceability section, I have this time entry, and if I pick all link types OK, then it automatically goes to a time entry. What's my UI here? That's kind of ugly. All right, so let's add a relationship. We'll go to the time entry, all link types, OK, and then time entry, okay? Which gives me the ability now to add conditions relative to timesheet entries, right? So I may be wanting to look at a specific date, day of the week, month, owner, time code, or time spent in minutes, etc. This gives me the ability to do that. I don't necessarily have any time entries in this particular example that I'm using, but this is how you would go about setting up that information to report against those timesheets, okay? Any questions on timesheets?
I have a question about JRS reports against the build results and work items tied to the build results and the change sets.
Okay.
Is there any enhancements towards that data source work item?
In terms of build sets, the only thing relative to build sets that I know of is possibly coming in 603. There wasn't much in terms of anything to do with builds in 602.
Okay.
Is there a specific piece of information you're trying to get to that you've either opened a defect on or an RFE around?
Yeah, it was more like an RFP. I did talk to Ernest Ma on that, earlier in Interconnect this year. It looks like there's no way to navigate further down the build result. I think when we navigate down from the artifact types, I think it stops at the build result and it doesn't go beyond that to the work items which are included in the build result and the change set which goes along with that as well. I mean, the objective is to get a list of all work items which are included in a given build through JRS.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know of anything in 602. One of the best things that you can do relative to tracking whether or not something is in, so let's talk about a couple of things, right? So, like, if I want to know what's currently going on with the most recent, like the milestone releases, like 603 milestone, or when they get to, a different milestone. This is the last milestone that's available on 603, right, the early access milestones. If you go to the new and noteworthy under the JRS section, it's going to show you everything that keeps getting added to, okay?
Okay.
So this is all the data around what's going on with 603 in the JRS. And so it's pointing to, the enhancements and or fixes that are going into it. In terms of APARs and that kind of thing, you can get to it relative to release notes. And I believe, where was it? There should be a link to the APAR information. Maybe it was here on the bottom. One sec.
Okay.
I know we maintain a link off to the APARs.
There is another question.
Yep.
Can you confirm that we can report on the following? 1, team membership. 2, streams. 3, which teams own stream. And 4, team history.
Okay, so there's a lot of pieces of information there. So let's talk about teams, right? Now, when we're talking about teams, are we talking about teams within the context of which product?
RTC, I'm interested in the owners of source code streams.
Okay, so more in the build space.
Correct.
Okay, so my guess is that relative to most of those pieces of information that were just stated, those are in the works, because I don't believe we support that much in depth relative to the builds at a particular moment in time. Now, that's not to say that you can't go about getting at that data by using the advanced SQL and or customizing ETLs. Okay? Again, those would be extreme better know what you're doing paths through that. And if that's a desire, like if an RFE for some of those pieces of information for reporting are like, I got to get that and I got to get that yesterday because I'm dying to get a certain report and I don't have a vehicle to get that report generated now, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that a lot of the information around the streams in those teams you can query directly within RTC itself. Is that a fair statement?
Manually, we have to provide audits, so we have to show all access to all source code over time. So that's why we need team history, team membership, stream ownership.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. So it sounds like understanding a little bit more of the complexity based on your last statement, it sounds like that's probably something that's in the works, but it may not even be 603 for which you'd be able to do that using JRS. Now that said, there's avenues that, I mean, since ETLs can be customized and the advanced query section allows you to go after things directly with the SQL, that may be more of an activity where if you reach out to services, they can hook you up with somebody that can help you author something temporarily until that is available through the front end.
Cool. What about backing way up and just saying team membership, independent of build of source code? Is that also out of scope right now, or is that much there?
That's a really good question. So let's just go after, hang on a second, artifacts, build. I want to look at format results. Well, there's team name. But I'm guessing that doesn't get you as deep as you'd like to go.
Right, because we want to, basically we want to select a contributor where member of team.
Okay, contributor where member of team. Okay, hold on one second for me. I want to just double check something on the milestone page.
All right.
I thought I had something relative to, and I guess not. All right, so you know what? Let me take that back as an action item.
Excellent.
And see what I can find out from development, and then I can basically respond to you and let you know that I've either got something from dev relative to when the support for something like that would be in place, or a name of somebody within services that you could potentially reach out to try and get services engaged to come work with you to build out something. Okay, so you're looking primarily for team membership within a stream?
No, within a project, I'd want to get a list of all the teams that are defined in that project, and for each team, I'd want to see all the contributors who are a member of that team. If that makes sense. And you know what? I feel guilty for taking the time because your presentation's really valuable. So let me send you, if you like, I'll send you the specifications to your email there, and you can bounce back and forth with me to get what you need.
Yeah, that'll actually give me a little bit more to go on when I'm talking to Dev.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
All right, so let me get back out of this build here. Go over here. So collections or modules. So both LQE and data warehouse are allowing you to look at requirements within a collection or a module. So you can get at this particular information. Let me go over here. Artifacts. So for this particular report that I built out, I just picked a collection or module in requirements management, and I went after a collection in this case. You can also go after a use case specification. Continue on. And basically for the link types here, let me back out of this so I can show you. So under requirement, I just chose all link types in terms of the relationship so that I could get requirement links for the items within the collection or module. continue. And then the collection or module type is collection, comes from up above in terms of what I already picked. So I didn't add that. Okay? And then basically I just left the defaults in terms of the columns for display that were going to show up. Now you can obviously go in here and you can add to at will and add or get as deep as you want in terms of what attributes are being displayed for this particular report. Let me hit save and then run. And basically it gives me the ability to see within this the collection or ID that it belongs to, its name, and the requirements, the associated requirements, right? So that's something that a lot of, especially if you're coming from the DOOR standalone world, we're desperately needing in terms of being able to look at just the requirements within a single collection. Okay? Let me go back here. And again, if you've got a question, feel free to just interrupt me. And because the more interactive it is, the better it is for everybody, I think. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the chart capabilities in terms of what was added for 602. Come on. The network is tired. It's Friday. Is my screen still sharing, Andrea? You see my little...
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Let me just refresh the page here real quick. See if there we go. Okay. So let's go over here. Format results. So again, I basically picked some work items, and I wanted to look at defects in particular and the counts of particular priorities around those or severities around those defects. Okay. The enhancement in 602, it's allowing us to go in here and basically label our X and Y axes. Okay, so we've got defect counts on the Y, and we've got breakdown by severity, and then I've basically got my severity grouped by counts across in terms of the severities for those defects. So being able to label these axes in this particular in a graphical representation, I should say, is something that was added in 602. In 603, this is also being enhanced so that your line bars and segment labels, well, let me actually show you here. Your line bars and segment labels give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of reordering the legend in terms of what's being displayed. Because you may decide that alphabetical just isn't for you. You want to make sure that you're listing it in a different way. So they're giving you some more capabilities around that in terms of these graphs. Okay? And everybody knows how to get to doing a graph, right? Or is that something that we want to talk about in terms of building out a graph report? Okay. Well, as you're building out your reports, if you want to go from a table view to a graph view, it's always going to be under this format section, and that's where you can pick and format accordingly. Okay? All right. So let me go back here. And whoops, that's not where I wanted. I wanted to go here. And as it loads. All right. The other thing that was added is multiple links for the same artifact type. So when you're setting your traceability, and let me go into edit mode here. So let me start here with the artifact. So I just picked work items in terms of my artifact, but say I want to be able to look at work items that have various other work items mapping or linking to them, like contributes to, the duplicate of, etc. I have the ability in my traceability to specify more than one when I'm actually picking my traceable pieces of parts here in this traceability. So what if I back up, let me just go ahead and take this off. So in here, right now I've got two of them selected, so that's just basically control click. And I've picked two. I can pick more than just the two, or I can go after all. And it'll basically show me all of those. Cancel that real quick. It'll show me all of those that are involved in the ones that I've selected. So that's available both LQE data source and data warehouse data source. Okay? Wow, it's going slow today. It's either Comcast or it's my test server. As you would guess, we don't have access to unlimited resource when we're building out our test servers. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about test environments and the enhancement to allow you to get at the test environments. So for LQE and for data warehouse, you can now get to the test information for your test execution records. If I go into edit here. So basically we're going against QM test case execution records, traceability, just I didn't specify any traceability. In our conditions here, if I want to bring up the edit here, I'm basically, for the test environment, I'm basically picking those particular environments for which I want to see what test cases or test execution records are mapped to what environments. Okay? So I can come in here and I can specify I want to see Chrome, I want to see Firefox, Internet Explorer, maybe I want to see, well, we'll just leave it at those three for now. I don't think I have any. I might in the JKA banking, but we'll leave it at that. But now you can get at this information for each of the data sources, both LQE and data warehouse. So it gives me out my list based on what environments I have available. Okay. I know in 603 that a lot of test scripts and the manual steps, they've added support for getting at some pieces of information that folks were wanting to see that aren't currently available in 602. Okay. All right, let's go back over here to our all reports, and I believe there's one more I want to talk about real quick. Oh, so work item approval tasks or work item approval records in RTC or CCM. So you could get at this information for data warehouse, but you couldn't get at this information for LQE. You can now get at this information regardless of which your data sources that you've chose. Okay. So let me go into edit, and I'll show you where I went in terms of this. Okay, so I'm just jumping down to artifacts. The first two sections is basically picking data warehouse, and the scope is just going against the JKE banking for change management. Okay, I'm just going against the work item here. In terms of the traceability links, this is where you're going to be looking at your approval tasks. So you'll notice here that this is kind of deep in terms of what's set up here. So we have approval tasks that's on the other side of the approval here for this relationship. So let me take that part out. And then under work item, you'll have this section for approval. If you pick all link types, let's see, yeah, it doesn't like it this way. I've got to take the whole relationship off and build it. So let me just go ahead and do that. Add relationship, approval, all link types. Okay. Add relationship, all link types, and okay. So now I have basically a path all the way down to those approval tasks. And this is the same way that you'll get at it whether you're using LQE or you're using the data warehouse source as your data source for your reporting. We go ahead and save and run. And oh, I changed something, didn't I? Un momento. What did I mess up? Got my, okay, approval task. Oh, there we go. Okay. So it's basically showing me those approval records, their current state, where they're pending approved, who owns the, or who the approver is, and the last update time. So it's kind of nice information, especially when you're running reviews with approval records through RTC. Okay? One of the things that's nice that's coming in 603, not in 602, is the ability to specify additional owners for reports. Right now, when you build out reports, it's basically you're the owner, so you have edit delete capacity on that thing, and so do any of the report managers who are defined. So if I go over here to admin, where we have our report managers defined, if you're an admin in this list, then you can edit and delete reports that others have created. If you aren't, then you can't do that activity. So if I'm an owner of a report in here, say that I've created, we'll say that I've created, 500 reports, and all of a sudden I'm no longer with the company where I built these reports. Unless a manager goes in and deletes those, you have no way to get rid of those because the person that owns them is no longer logging in and can't delete them. Okay? So within 603, the thing that's nice is being able to specify report owners so that other people can become owners of the same report, whether they built it or they didn't. Okay? So at this point, we have 10 minutes left to our scheduled slot, and I just want to kind of open it up to free forum-like questions around JRS because I know that building out reports is one of those areas where you can get really deep and complex, or you can be like totally confused by how am I supposed to do something. And so I want to give opportunity for all those types of questions so that we can either, if I don't know the answer, take it back to Dev and or someone else and get an answer for you, or we can answer it right here and right now. Any questions out there?
I have a question about the data sources. Is there any benefit in using LQE when we are not using configuration, global configurations, that is?
If you're not using global, so let me clarify something about LQE, okay? So if you're using global configuration management, then LQE is an absolute must in terms of some of the reporting that you need to do, okay? When you take a project area and you make it a global configuration project such that you're going to do global configurations on it, or a lifecycle set of projects that are going to be globally configured, et cetera, they stop sending data to the data warehouse at that point. As soon as you enable them, they're no longer data warehouse available, if that's the right word to use. That data is now basically tracked resource sets and can only be consumed in reports via the LQE data source. If you're not going to use global configuration management, then LQE becomes a preference on whether or not you want to use it. And I say it becomes a preference because while there's pros, there's also cons, okay? And you have to weigh out what's best in terms of your environment. With LQE, you need to think about LQE as being an on-disk database, meaning right now if you're running against a data warehouse, all that's on whatever database server that you've got, and that server is built out to be a database server. With LQE being kind of the equivalent of an on-disk database, you have to really think about the resources that are applied to it so that it's treated like an on-disk database. It basically gives you faster access to the data because it's memory mapped, which means all of the data that LQE is harvesting and indexing in RDF stores basically gets mapped into the native operating system memory that's available for fast Sparkle queries. Okay? So when I say there's pros to it, there's pros because when you execute against something that's right there on the same machine and it doesn't have to make a database call, it's supposed to be a lot faster. However, if your data set that's on disk is huge and it has to load a lot of stuff into native memory in order to query against it, then there's trade-offs.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's a preference call. In my mind, going to the database, as long as my data is fresh enough, and I can't think of any scenario, and I've been doing systems engineering for probably 15, 16 years, okay, out of the time I've spent with IBM. I can't think of a single instance across every client that I've ever supported where having more than a 30-minute to a 1-hour refresh currency is ever needed in terms of reporting, okay? LQE, can you hear me? Oh, there was some static. LQE is always constantly running to make sure that things are up to date at every 5-10 minute type of intervals, okay? I can't think of any situation I've ever been in with a client where having a report generated every 5 minutes was a true need. So that's why why I say you really have to weigh the benefit of putting something that heavyweight into play.
Yep. And also the backup requirements also comes into play, right? LTE needs to be backed up periodically on the application.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for the insight. Just want to.
What's that?
Yeah. Thanks for your insight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't. Just thinking about all of the situations I've been in. I mean, I've worked with clients that had some serious reporting needs in terms of what they had to generate and how fast or frequently they had to. But I can't think of one of them that a 30-minute or a 1-hour refresh cycle wouldn't more than adequately cover. And data warehouse, or sorry, the data collection that is populating your data warehouse, this can, I mean, the ODS section, right? And this is more to an administrator's set of tasks. But this operational data store, which is basically going out to the applications, grabbing anything that's changed since the last time it ran, and populating to the data warehouse, these are designed to run as frequently as 30 minutes, right?
Yep.
Because the intent behind that is if I'm running every 30 minutes, the amount of updates I've got in 30 minutes should never be that painful, right?
That's correct. And also with DCC, offloading that to a different application server should help in increasing the frequency of the refresh. So as you said.
Exactly. These jobs, however, data mart collection jobs, these are where all of your performance hit come from because these are doing a lot of work. They're cleaning up data in the data warehouse. They're taking care of, I have 1,000 links that somebody's deleted or updated or changed, so I got to make sure my metrics and my facts and dimensions, et cetera, are up to date so that trending information in reports is accurate and that kind of thing. This is where all those jobs are happening, and these take time because it's a lot of work that has to happen on the data itself.
Okay.
The ODS is basically go get it and then populate it, right? I mean, that's a straightforward transaction, whereas these are applying logic to do stuff with the data, right? So they're going to involve update and write locks.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else relative to the data sources or reporting? And believe me, there is never a stupid question around this stuff. Don't ever think that your question is not important enough to ask. Even the simplest question.
Stupid question is my cue. I said stupid question is my cue. Let me ask you this then, if you don't mind.
No worries.
We were doing a report against, and we just started. We were doing a report against DNG requirements, and we couldn't find status, and it was puzzling. So we went into RRDI. And we found the status, and we found the table name and the column name. We went back into JRS, and we edited the SQL, and we discovered it was already joining to that table. So we added the field name in, and it showed up. So our experience was that the status field was not exposed in the field picker, but it was available if you edited the SQL. Is that expected to you, or does that sound just really weird?
So you're talking about the system-defined status and not a custom-defined status, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Requirement. I wouldn't expect that to be the case. Attribute. So it's got state. But my initial gut feeling would be that state is not the same as the status field that we're talking about.
That was our experience.
But we can know in just 1 second here. Then we can go look at the... So state is obviously not populated.
Yep.
And by the way, not for the non-SQL gurus. And I don't consider myself an SQL guru, but I've hacked and slashed in here with some success and some extreme failure, just to be clear.
So
once you hit the edit query button, you're locking yourself into always working in here too, by the way, with a report. I imagine most people know that, but I just want to make sure that that's clear.
So we just added T1 status here, and it showed up.
Yep. I could see that. Which is not expected in my mind, but we'll see. Let me add a comma up here. And save and run.
Okay. Well, now we saw that and we thought we were failing, but then we added a where status is not null, and then they showed up because they were
Okay. Oops.
I'm not sure about your syntax, but we had to use the words is not.
Really?
Yeah, we didn't try is not equal. In other contexts like Oracle, that's not equivalent syntax.
Any requirements where it's not null?
Yeah, if you replace your two comparator signs with the words is not, I think you'll find it'll work.
Let's see. Oops. If that's the case, have you raised that up?
No.
Status to me on a requirement is bread and butter.
There you go.
That's extremely interesting. This is bread and butter to anybody doing requirements analysis.
Yeah.
So, and believe me, I mean, I've done my fair share of RTM hierarchies. So, yeah, I would say that that's not expected behavior to not be able to get at the status, just simply because it's in there and it's in the data warehouse.
Yeah.
And if it's in the data warehouse, you should be able to get to it.
It made us wonder what else is not exposed in the picker. And if that was the only field, or if there was a whole panoply of them, which,
I mind that's a defect and should be raised as such, and I'll reach out to Dev and ask the question, because I know the guys that work on the report builder.
Sweet. Well, thank you very much. This is super constructive. And I got to duck out, unfortunately. I'd rather stay here.
Yeah, I know we're at the top of the hour. But you guys all saw what my email was. If you have a question, feel free to email me. I'm always around.
Good deal. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Here, I will turn the. I'll try to figure out how to turn this back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everyone for the awesome questions. As we wrap up, if you enjoyed today's webinar and have any topics you'd like to see us touch on in the future, be sure to reach out. Remember, you'll be receiving an email this afternoon with a link to today's recorded webinar. On behalf of CloudOne, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.